Game 3. We welcome in the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. College World Series, Kyle Peterson. He gives us a little bit of his time on the final day of the college baseball season. Good morning, KP.
Good morning, guys. Good morning.
Good. How are you doing? Are you hanging in there?
I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good. The old double day off doesn't hurt.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
kind of nice.
Oh,
Gets you right in the middle of it.
That came along at the right time.
Yeah.
So there is, we've been through this scenario before of team wins game 1, team wins game 2. What does it mean game 3? Do you believe that there is momentum from winning on Sunday to keep your season alive that can benefit you playing game 3, a la Tennessee?
I think the momentum is you're still playing.
Hmm.
But for me, it kind of ends there. Like, you can get punched in the mouth in the top of the first inning and momentum's gone. And as cliche as it is, I think momentum today is your starting pitcher and what it looks like in the first few innings. I was impressed by Tennessee yesterday because honestly, they don't fall behind very often.
Mm-hmm.
And when they do, sometimes I think there's a little bit of a panic. And yesterday, you hit one of the seats and everything changes, and they play with such an edge. And I think it's easier to play with an edge when you're ahead. People just react a little bit different when you're winning, no matter what you're doing in life. So that was impressive to me yesterday. And for A&M, I don't think they get fazed by a whole lot, honestly. So I'm excited for tonight. I have no idea what we're going to see, but I think it'll be good.
Tony Vitelli says after the game that their approach was a lot more common to what he's seen with Tennessee. And back to your point about what happens late in that game where you approach the game the right way. It's a lot more true to character for this Tennessee team. And then they see that end result. Kind of goes back to where they approach this game. And I know Gary asked the question, who has more of the pressure on them. But when you look at Tennessee at their best versus Texas A&M at their best, is there much difference? If we're to see that tonight, if we're to see both these teams at their best, the way that they go and approach this game, is it either team, in your opinion, have an edge?
I don't think anybody has a huge edge. I think A&M may have an edge late because Aschenbach has been so good this year, and he should be ready to go. And he should be ready to go for as long as you want him to. And I think that is a huge advantage because he's that one piece. Cortez is that piece too, but you never know if Cortez is going to throw strikes. Mm-hmm. And he threw enough strikes yesterday to show you, what a big league closer looks like when it's right. His stuff is that good. For Aschenbach, he's going to throw strikes. And he's had such success that I do think it gives them an advantage late. What Tennessee can do, which is so rare right now, is their bullpen depth with totally different looks is rare to, I think, most of college baseball, to where you can roll, the sidewinder out, and then you roll the lefty out that gets lefties out, and then you roll two guys out that throw 100. And there's so many different looks, and so it's advantageous, but they don't have the one guy now that Combs is down. Mm-hmm. Because I don't think you can pitch Combs, or if you do, maybe you get you 3 outs. They don't have Aschenbach, and I think Aschenbach is a huge advantage.
So Kirby Cannell actually will be called in from the bullpen tomorrow when the season is over. He pitches a lot, but he's the other left-hander, and he's starting tonight. So with all of that said, and I absolutely agree with you about Texas A&M's back end. So Xander Sechrest for Tennessee has to do what tonight for Tennessee to avoid a situation where they're playing from behind against that back end of the A&M bullpen?
I think he's got to do what he's done all year. He's been really consistent. And he's not going to blow you away stuff-wise, but he can really pitch. And I think that's a testament to Frank Anderson. He forces guys to throw strikes, and if you don't throw strikes, you don't pitch. And that's why they throw as many strikes as essentially anybody in the country. He's a really good example of that. And he doesn't try to pitch outside of his stuff. Mm-hmm. And I don't think he will in this environment. I think he'll be who he is. He may get hit. But I think he'll throw strikes, and if he does what he's done the whole season, I think he'll give him a real chance.
You said something that I think is interesting. If Texas A&M is able to win this one, you said there's nothing you can really throw at them that's going to take them off. How much of that has to do with what they've experienced here, especially as of late, with the injuries, Braden Montgomery, and just a lot of the nicks that they've had to endure here in the postseason? Yet they still continue to roll. I mean, actually losing their first game of the NCAA tournament yesterday. How much of that you just can't throw a lot at them has to do with what they've overcome from the injury standpoint?
I think a lot. I think there's a okay, now what mentality.
Right.
Like, okay, that happened. We're still here. And it gets infectious, honestly. And if you're going to do that, it takes one or two that maybe you haven't looked at as being that that catalyst that becomes that catalyst. And Caden Kent has been that.
Yeah.
You know, he came up in a big spot last night. He popped out. Other than that, like every time he's come up in a big spot, he's figured out a way to do something.
Mm-hmm.
He also made a really good defensive play last night. He got picked off. Okay. You know, we can have our moments where you get caught up in the environment. And he probably did a little bit. But other than that, man, I mean, there's not one player on that roster that you can look at and say has been more important to what this run has been over the last 2 weeks than a kid that during the course of the season had 14 RBIs.
Yeah.
And if Braden Montgomery doesn't get hurt, is a pinch hitter right now.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the teams that make a run to win this thing have that guy, whoever that guy is. And usually coming in, you can't point to a roster and say that's going to be the guy. But if you're going to win the thing, you need one of those. And he's been that guy so far for them.
How does Tennessee, and he's going to be dinged up a little bit. He made a heads-up play yesterday, tagging up from first to second. Maybe not a heads-up play, but he took a chance. How does Tennessee get Christian Moore going at the top of the lineup?
Make sure he doesn't get thrown out. That's the biggest thing. And I don't say it to be facetious. Like, and to me, like, Simo's the guy you want on your team. Everybody should want that guy on your team. But he sometimes, when he's best, honestly, he plays right at the edge.
Mm-hmm.
And Tennessee is very fortunate that they had Scott Klein behind home plate last night, because Scott Klein's an SEC umpire, and he's seen them before, and he knows what he's walking into. And he could have thrown Tony out in the first inning, and it would have made sense. The game could have gone a lot different if it's not a guy behind home plate that knows that team really well. And so I think that's the biggest thing, is make sure that you're just playing on the edge, and you're not going over the edge. Because the last thing that they need tonight is to go over the edge.
That is a fantastic point of an SEC guy behind the plate that knows Tony and has had interaction with Tony. So he knows that act and how far they both understand how far they can go. And you're right about the Christian Moore after he walked and he was jawing with the pitcher. That's a great point. Because, early on, the strike zone was an issue and people were chirping on both sides. But I think that's a fantastic point about a guy understands who's playing here and the emotions of the game, because he's seen it before, not in Omaha, but maybe at Lindsey Nelson Stadium or at Olsen Field.
And it's an SEC series. I mean, at the end of the day, this happens at Lindsey Nelson. This happens at Bluebell. And honestly, the environment is more hostile, even though there's less people, because they're right on top of you and they're going crazy and everybody's yelling for one team instead of both teams. And I want to stand up for Scott for a minute too. Like, the stuff that Tony was going crazy about in the first inning, those were balls.
Yep.
I know that, like, from the side you can't tell, and your catcher may get caught up in the moment a little bit. I got TrackMan. I'm looking at it. And we try to handle things in a way to where I hate blasting umpires, because as much as fans like to think that they don't care who wins. They want to call as best a game as they possibly can and go have dinner. That's it. There's nothing more to it than that. And like, by and large, for a really high majority last night, Scott was right. and he was definitely right in the first inning. But above everything, I think the best thing he did was chill things out a little bit, give a warning in the first, like, okay, I heard you. That's it. We're not doing this anymore. And now let's go play. And to your point, like he's been in that arena before a lot. And he knows how to handle it, I think, as good as anybody.
Real quickly before I let you go here, Kyle, the A&M starting side, you mentioned Aschenbeck, at what point you use him. If you're Jim Schlossnagle tonight and you've got that ideal plan for Justin Lampkin, obviously you want to go as long as possible, but is there a point that it's not nearly enough that you get out of Justin Lampkin where Evan Aschenbeck has to come in and it's almost too early? Is there an ideal situation for Lampkin other than the obvious of being able to get you 5 or 6?
I think you hit the number. I mean, I think it's 5 or 6. I think your ideal is that you use 2 guys.
Yeah.
And there can be other bridges. Like they have other pieces down there that can get 3 outs. I don't think it's realistic against this offense to ask somebody in the bullpen to go get you 6 or 9 tonight and think it's really going to work, or at least keep it a 0. And listen, like Aschenbeck may run into some barrels. Like just because he hasn't all year, he's facing the best offense in the country. So that's what Tennessee does. But if you draw it up for A&M, it's a 2-pitcher game. And I don't think it's all that realistic to think Aschenbeck is going to be Aschenbeck for more than 9 outs. At some point, there gets to be, a diminishing return.
Yeah.
And I think 9 outs is plenty. More than that, you start dancing with fire a little bit.
Yeah. Hey, as always, we appreciate it. That was a fun college baseball game yesterday. Hopefully we get another one tonight.
All right, boys. Appreciate you guys. See ya.